Having reached the gate of what was generally termed his magnificent establishment, and he waited till the stylish groom in attendance upon him came up, Sir Matthew and his estimable friend left their horses with him, and entered the court, which, protected by a very lofty wall, surrounded the buildings on all sides. Those persons who have, once in their lives, seen a large cotton factory need no description of it, for it has features which, once looked upon, can never be forgotten. But, for the information of those who have not, a slight sketch of Sir Matthew Dowling's establishment shall be given. It consisted of very extensive buildings constructed in the centre of the enclosed court, and forming three sides of a vast square, the fourth being open on the side fronting the principal gates of entrance. When it is stated that the edifice consisted of 6 stories, and that each side of it presented 6 lines of windows containing 40 windows in each line, some idea of its magnitude may be conceived. Mchl was already at the gates, and, on the approach of Sir Matthew, rang the bell, a ceremony necessary to obtain admittance both for masters and labourers, no means of entrance or exit being ever left unsecured for a single instance. The summons was answered by a lame boy, stationed within to perform the office of porter. He bent low before the great man, and low too before his jeering friend, though the jocose visits of the latter to the factory were dreaded as much as the lash itself. Neither the one nor the other seemed to see him, but passed on. Then followed poor little Mchl, hating most cordially the bravery of the attire, which had made him expect to meet the ridicule rather than the sympathy of his late companions. On seeing a young stranger, the lame porter looked up, but from him at least Mchl had nothing to fear, for the boy's languid eye surveyed his altered person without the slightest suspicion of having ever seen it before. Sir Matthew, like most others of his craft, was not in the habit of indulging his family by exhibiting them to the secret arcana of that hideous mystery by which the delicate forms of young children are made to mix and mingle with machinery, from whence flows the manufacturer's wealth. This divine portion of the vast engine being considered, however, as vastly and very inferior, though necessary part of it. But, although they had never honoured the premises with a visit, it was, of course, well known to all that Sir Matthew Dowling was the father of numerous progeny, and Mchl, passed on amidst such blessings as human nature, under such circumstances, was likely to bestow on one of them. The party entered the building, whence, as all know who have done the like, every sight, every sound, every scent was sent that kind nature has fitted to the organs of her children, so as to render the mere unfettered use of them a delight, are banished for ever and ever. The ceaseless whirring of millions of hissing wheels seizes on the tortured ear, and while threatening to destroy the delicate sense, seems bent on proving first, with a sort of mocking mercy, of how much suffering it can be the cause. The scents that reek around, from oil, tainted water, and human filth, with that last worst nausea arising from the hot refuse of atmospheric air left by some hundreds of pairs of labouring lungs, render the act of breathing a process of difficulty, disgust, and pain. All this is terrible, but what the eye brings home to the heart of those who look around the horrid earthly hell is enough to make it all forgotten. For who can think of villainous smells, or heed the suffering of the ear-racking sounds, while they look upon hundreds of helpless children, divested of every trace of health, of joyousness, even of youth? Assuredly there is no exaggeration in this, for except only in their diminutive size, these suffering infants have no trace of it. Lean and distorted limbs, sallow and sunken cheeks, dim hollow eyes that speak unrest and most unnatural carefulness, give to each tiny, trembling, unelastic form a look of hideous, premature old age. But in the room they entered, the dirty, ragged, miserable crew were all in active performance of their various tasks, the overlookers, strap in hand, on the alert, the whirling spindles urging the little slaves who waited on them to movements as unceasing as their own, and the whole monstrous chamber redolent of all the various impurities that, by the perfection of our manufacturing system, are converted into gales of Araby for the rich, after passing into the shape of certain poison through the lungs of the poor. So Sir Matthew proudly looked about him and approved, and though it was athwart that species of haughty frown in which such dignity as his is apt to clothe itself, Dr. Crookley failed not to perceive that his friend and patron was in good humour, and likely to be pleased by any light and lively jestings in which he might indulge. Perceiving, therefore, that little Mchl passed on with downcast eyes, unrecognized by any, he wrote upon a slip of paper, for he knew that his voice could not be heard, "Make the boy take that bare-legged scavenger round the neck, and give her a kiss while she is next lying down, and let us see them sprawling together." Sir Matthew read the scroll and grinned applause. The miserable creature to whom the factorious doctor pointed was a little girl of about 7 years old, whose office as scavenger was to collect incessantly from the machinery and from the floor the flying fragments of cotton that might impede the work. In the performance of this duty, the child was obliged from time to time to stretch itself with sudden quickness on the ground while the hissing machinery passed over her, and when this is skilfully done, and the head and body, outstretched limbs carefully glued to the floor, the steady moving but threatening mass may pass and repass over the dizzy head and trembling body without touching it. But accidents frequently occur, and many are the flaxen locks rudely torn from infant heads in the process. It was a sort of vague hope that something comical of this kind might occur which induced Dr. Crockley to propose this frolic to his friend, and probably the same idea suggested itself to Sir Matthew likewise. "I say, Master Mchl," vociferated the knight in a scream, which successfully struggled with the din, "show your old acquaintance that pride has not gotten the upper hand of you in your fine clothes. Take scavenger, number 3 there, round the neck. Now, as she lies sprawling, and let us see you give her a hearty kiss." The stern and steady machinery moved onwards, passing over the body of the little girl, who owed her safety to the miserable leanness of her shrunken frame. But Mchl moved not. "Are you deaf, little vermin?" roared Sir Matthew. "Now she's down again. Do what I bid, or, by the living God, you shall smart for it." Still Mchl did not stir, neither did he speak, or, if he did, his young voice was wholly inaudible, and the anger of Sir Matthew was demonstrated by a clenched fist and a threatening brow. "Where the devil is Parsons?" he demanded in accents that poor Mchl both heard and understood. "Fine as he is, the strap will do him good." In saying this, the great man turned to reconnoitre the space he had traversed, and by which his confidential servant must approach, and found that he was already within a good yard of him. "That's good. I want you, Parsons. Do you see that little rebel here, that I have dressed and treated as like one of my own children? What do you think of his refusing to kiss Miss number 3, scavenger, when I bid him?" "The devil he does," said the manager, grinning. "We must see if we can't mend that. Mind you hits, Mr. Piercer, and salute the young lady when the mules go back, like a gentleman." Sir Matthew perceived that his favourite agent feared to enforce his first brutal command, and was forced, therefore, to content himself with seeing the oiled and grimy face of the filthy girl in contact with that of the now clean and delicate-looking Mchl. But he felt that he had been foiled, and cast a glance upon his protégé, which seemed to promise that he would not forget it. Having made known to the superintendent that it was his pleasure to enter the room where the brother of Mchl was at work, Mr. Parsons led the way to the 5th floor of the building. Sir Matthew, however, ordered the door of each chamber, as he passed up, to be opened for him, that he might look upon his sifting slaves, and satisfy himself that neither wheels nor sinews were loitering in unthrifty repose. The air that issued from each was nauseous, and on entering the room at the further end of which Edward Armstrong was employed, Dr. Crockley secretly resolved that when making the final arrangements for his promised appointment, it should be specified that he should never enter the working portion of the establishment, for though by no means a particularly scientific practitioner, the little doctor knew quite enough of business he followed to be aware that, in his own case at least, the air which filled it could not be breathed with impunity. "Now then, sir," said Sir Matthew, addressing himself to Mchl, while Parsons opened the door on the 5th floor, and announced that this was on This was the room that contained Edward. "Now, sir, walk on and find your brother, and if your pride does not stand in your way, let him be made to understand all the extraordinary kindness I have shown you. Take care that you let him and all his companions know that I have adopted you as one of my own family, and that henceforth they will always see you dressed as well as you are at present." All that Mchl clearly understood from this harangue was, that he had permission to go forward and speak to this brother, and though not venturing quite to run, he moved onwards at a pace that speedily brought him within sight of Edward. The little fellow who, despite his gay disguise, immediately recognized him, uttered a cry of joy. Love conquered fear, and dropping the reel he had just taken between his fingers, he rushed from the place he occupied before the mules, and the next moment was fondly clasped in his brother's arms. Every laborer in the factory, within sight of the spot where this meeting took place, forgot all standing orders in their astonishment, and stood with gaping mouths and eyes fixed upon the astounding spectacle. Sir Matthew, too, forgot for an instant that every movement made within that crowded chamber, not having for its object the transmutation of human life into gold, was a positive loss for him, for the display of his extraordinary benevolence was, he conceived, of high importance, and he looked round with great contentment on the multitude of wondering faces which he saw peering over the machinery in all directions, to gaze on the sight he had prepared for them. "This will be talked of, or the devil is in it," thought he. "I should like to know who would dare mention night work and hard usage now? Capital scheme this, as ever was hit upon." And from the gazers he now turned his eyes upon the object that fixed their attention, when, to his inconceivable astonishment and rage, he perceived that the two boys, who still stood locked in each other's arms, were both weeping bitterly. "Not loud, but deep," were the curses that he breathed against the unfortunate object of his affected bounty, and faithfully did he pledge a promise to his own heart that he should pay for the vexation he thus occasioned him. But for the present he condescended to veil the feeling by a smile more bland than any one ever before witnessed from him within those walls, and striding forwards to the sobbing children, he laid a hand on the shoulder of each, while he said in a voice that seemed endowed by nature with an especial power of competing with the thunder of a cotton mill, "Come, come, my dears, I know you are crying for joy, but you must not go on so, or it will look as if little Mchl was ungrateful for all I had done him. Have you told your brother, dear, how I ordered you to take some nice things home to your mother? That will make him look up. I'll answer for it. There, now I'll leave you here, that you may tell your friends that you have been made a gentleman of, on account of your good behavior, and because you was faithful to your master. Let them have 10 minutes, parsons, with the mules still standing still, that they may hear all the story." Sir Matthew then turned about and hastened out of the factory, followed by Dr. Crockley, and as they strode slowly homewards by some round-about lanes that were shaded from the sun, they discussed high thoughts, such as Ligurius loved when he bade flog the little Spartans. And ere they reached the luxurious abode of the night, had between them sketched such a scheme of political, moral, and religious defence for the factory system in all its branches, and in all its bearings, that the doctor, as he descended from his horse, snapped his fingers triumphantly, exclaiming, "A fig for them all, Sir Matthew! If they mine, egad, we'll countermine, and we'll start with such a pretty tolerable advantage. You are a man of science, Sir Matthew Darling, and I need not tell you that a powerful movement, once in action, is devilishly hard to stop. This vis inertis will work for us, my friend, not to mention that when the animals find out their only alternative is labor or starvation, labor, so much as you in your bounty will be pleased to bestow, they will all grow as patient as so many suckling doves." These words were spoken as they slowly mounted together the steps of the stately portico. Sir Matthew, as a reply, shook his friend cordially by the hand, and leading the way to the cool and lofty library, ordered ice water and claret to wash away the effects of their half-hour's visit to the factory.